So, please go ahead and start. Thank you.
Hello everyone. Greetings from Istanbul, Turkey. I hope you're having a great day wherever you are, in which parts of the world. I am Associate Professor Arzu Ozcelik from Yıldız Technical University. Today I will focus on empathy among English language teachers. Let me share my presentation with you. We are going through times in which we question whether we can attribute human-like qualities to artificial intelligence tools, right? We question whether artificial intelligence tools can empathize with us, whether artificial intelligence tools can show their emotions, whether we can chat with artificial intelligence tools in our daily life. But isn't it high time to question whether we show empathy towards each other? Huh? I would like to focus on empathy in this session. Empathy is the core of human relations. It's the core of human communication. It is the capability to step into one's shoes, to understand their feelings. It doesn't mean full agreement. You can agree on disagreement. You don't have to agree all the parts of his or her discussion. It doesn't mean full understanding, but of understanding. It doesn't mean giving advice or giving suggestions all the time. It means stepping into one's shoes and trying to understand his or her feelings. We have mirror neurons in our brain. When a person cries, we tend to cry. When a person smiles, we tend to smile back. So we have mirror neurons and they get activated when see a person in a situation. A person can be sad, a person can be depressed, a person can be happy. If our experiences are similar enough, we can empathize with that person. If our experiences are different, no problem, we can offer another perspective. But why I use tend to? We tend to smile back. We tend to be sad rather than we people always do. Because in every story we have villains, characters who do not resonate with others' emotions, who fail, who do not have the capacity, who refuse to mirror what they see. So this reminds us that empathy is a kind of capacity. It's not a guarantee all the time. We need to work on that. We need to reflect on ourselves. In Conrad et al. Study, it's a meta-analysis, they conducted research on college-age students and they indicated a decline in their level of empathy. Why do today's students display considerably less empathy? Or let's say, why do we show less empathy? You come up with your own reasons in your mind, right, dear participants? So you have your own reasons. Let me show you some of mine. For example, we are exposed to distressing news all the time. We are exposed to crisis. We are exposed to online content all the time. So we see them very normal. We don't show our emotions. And also, there are some changes in how empathy is shown. For example, we like people's posts, we put emojis in people's posts. Maybe it is the way we are trying to show empathy. Maybe it's a different way. And we have constant notifications and we are multitasking. We are doing many things at the same time. And it makes it harder to be present in that situation. So therefore, mindfulness is a very popular topic nowadays. People are talking about mindfulness, being present in that moment. And maybe after the pandemic, we don't want to have face to face communication. Maybe also we are affected by violence in video games. Students, young people, they like playing video games. have cultural shifts towards individualism. There are some social media posts, and they say that you are the center of the universe, you are the center. So just focus on yourself, forget other people. You are the most important thing in the world. So we have shifts towards individualism. These can be some of the possible reasons why we show less empathy in today's world. Maybe you have your own reasons. You can share them with us if you like. You can use the chat box. Why should we explore empathy in ELT in our classes? Because learning is emotional, learning is social, learning is identity related in language classes. But despite this, we sometimes treat empathy as a personal trait, not a pedagogical practice. And also, there is limited empirical research on capturing teachers' own meaning making around empathy. We don't know how they feel about empathy. Therefore, I wanted to focus on that in my research. And also, empathy is one of the integral components of emotional intelligence. We need self awareness, we need self regulation, we need social skills, motivation, and empathy to have to have emotional intelligence in our lives. And in educational context, in language classes, in classrooms, teachers' emotional intelligence is highly important. It supports empathic classroom interactions because we pay attention to emotional cues in our classes, we pay attention to emotional responses in our classes. So we expect language teachers, all teachers, to have emotional intelligence. Aim of the study, I tried to understand how language teachers conceptualize empathy and how they experience, how they practice it in their classes. The focus is not on effectiveness, the focus is on understanding what they understand from empathy, what they do about it in their classes. And also, if you like, dear participants, you can write your own practices to the chat box, how you enact it in your classes, what you do about empathy in your classes. With a few words, if you like, you can write the name of the task you do with your students. It's a qualitative study using interpretive phenomenological analysis, and I try to understand their experiences, and I try to understand how they approach this topic. And I conducted semi-structured interviews with 6 English language teachers. They have been working at high schools in Turkey, in Istanbul. On average, they have more than 5 years of teaching experience. I encouraged them to share concrete classroom incidents, reflect on their decisions, emotions related to empathy. For example, let's have a look at the findings, how the participants in my study understand empathy. For them, empathy was more than understanding students' feelings. For example, it means careful listening for them, it means patience for them, it means flexibility, adapting instructions to students' needs. So we have burden on our shoulder, right? It means more than one thing. We are multitasking all the time, as I have said at the beginning of the presentation. For example, from the teachers' extracts, one of the teachers remarked that I realize empathy means slowing down. I realize empathy means waiting for students. So showing patience is a kind of empathy for teachers. And empathy research emerged as a relational, action-oriented thing in the classroom. We need to do something about empathy in our classes. We need to wait for our students. We need to show patience towards our students. For example, some empathy in practice examples from my research. One teacher noticed students having difficulty in writing tasks. She gathered anonymous feedbacks from their students, and the reflections showed some problems in organization, some problems in brainstorming. So she allowed more planning time for her students. So in this case, empathy emerged as being reflective, responsive, and pedagogically meaningful. Another teacher noticed several students becoming quiet during the tasks in the classroom. She tried to understand the hidden reasons behind that. So she gathered some feedback from the students. After that, the teacher adjusted her lesson pacing. Does empathy enable for teachers from the perspective of teachers, from the perspectives of the participants in my study? Teachers linked empathy to trust building. So they create a supportive classroom atmosphere thanks to empathy. And it increases learner motivation. We can understand from the extracts in the interviews. For example, one of the teachers remarked that empathy builds trust slowly. Another teacher remarks that empathy makes students more willing. If you see that there is someone present in the classroom, he or she is willing to understand your feelings, you show willingness to participate in classroom activities. So empathy was seen as foundational to positive classroom relationships in language classes from the perspective of the participants. But is it easy to show empathy all the time? So I asked the participants, I asked the language teachers the possible problems they can have in the classroom, the challenge they have. There are some challenges, of course. Maybe you have your own challenge in your mind. Maybe you are saying, is it easy to show empathy all the time? They describe some structural constraints, for example, having large classroom size and time pressure, rigid curricula, they have weekly schedules. For example, one of the teachers said that I want to be empathetic, but for example, you have 40 students in the classroom. Is it easy to show empathy all the time? Another teacher mentioned that, for example, you can see a student struggling, but you have to finish the unit, you have to finish the content. So time pressures you to move on. So sometimes you can't show empathy. And sometimes, from the perspective of teachers, empathy was sometimes felt but not enacted. They know there is a problem with that student, but they might understand what that student is going through, but they need to move on because they have weekly pacing, so they can't devote more time to that problem in the classroom. Maybe this resonates with you. You have large classroom size, or you can understand teachers' feelings. So it is very difficult to show empathy all the time. Even in our daily life, we can understand that. Some key insights from the study: empathy is not personal from the perspectives of teachers. Empathy is shaped by teachers' personal beliefs, institutional teaching conditions. What we mean, there are many factors in showing empathy in the classroom. For example, curriculum makers, administrators, teachers, parents, students, they are all effective factors on this topic. So this challenges the idea that empathy is solely an individual responsibility. No, it is the responsibility of all the actors in the classroom, not only the teachers, but also the parents, curriculum makers, the administrators, which don't have large classroom size to show empathy, for example. So we need some other things as well. And what kind of implications we can have? This should be addressed as practical teachable skill, not just as a moral value. Teacher education should focus on that. Professional development should focus on that. We should have reflective practices in the classroom. We should discuss real classroom dilemmas. And we should focus on some classroom activities to increase empathy among our students. As educators, we can have positive results. We can create a classroom community thanks to empathy, and students learn to understand each other. They build friendship. We have better student and teacher relationships. Have a very tentative list. This is not a finite list. Maybe you can have your own list as well. This is just self checklist, for example. These are the questions I ask to myself, whether I am an empathetic teacher. For example, let's go through them all together. Do you ask your students about their dreams? Are you curious about their dreams? For example, do you share your disappointments, regrets, success stories, stories with your students? Of course, we shouldn't share very private things, but for example, failure students. failure anecdotes, for example, success stories, regret stories. Do you use humor with your students? For example, do you avoid jokes about sensitive issues, about their physical appearance, about their hometown, family, religion? For example, in one of the speaking exam, I had a partner, and one of the students told us that she doesn't have a father. And my partner insisted on asking some more questions, and she asked, what do you mean I don't have a father? But I guess we should avoid such questions. They are really private questions, and maybe we don't want to talk about such questions, so we need to avoid them in the classroom. Do you smile and call your students by their names? At least you do your best to learn their names. Do you make eye contact with them? Do you allow them to use their native language, sometimes to share something personal with you? Do you show them that you are really listening to them? And also, we can ask some empathetic questions during the lessons, during the activities as well. How does that make you feel? Do you know at times I also felt scared? How would that make your friend feel? What do you think that character felt in the story, in the film? What do you think he or she made those decisions? What emotion is that, to name that emotion? And for example, when we read a text, when we, for example, discuss a piece of literature, a works of art, or a film, we can ask some empathetic questions. How would you feel if you were that person? What do you think that person might be feeling? For example, what led him to do that? So we can focus on such questions to understand each other's feelings. What would you have done differently in that situation? For example, you can have your own questions as well, so we can increase those questions in our classes. These are my references. Thank you so much. If you have any questions, I would be happy to answer them. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Yes.